right. Oh. Testing, testing. All right. Good morning, everyone. We'll get things started here in just a moment. I just want to thank you all for attending what is now the 7th year of the Animas and Juan Watersheds Conference. It's a pleasure on behalf of the New Mexico Water Resources Research Institute to help organize this conference, to bring together researchers, students, agency personnel, nonprofits, all kinds of people who care about these watersheds to share the latest research, monitoring, management projects that are taking place around the area. So let's see. First of all, I just want to give some thank yous. Thank you to the staff from the Water Resources Research Institute who have helped put this conference together. A big thank you as well to San Juan College for hosting this conference now. Every year of this conference, we've had it here. Especially the AV staff and Chris Rosen for allowing us to offer a hybrid virtual experience for those who can't attend in person. Big thank you as well to the planning committee, who is instrumental in making each year's conference happen. I know I've seen Alyssa Richmond, Elizabeth Stuffings, I saw Kevin Lombard here, Johanna Blake. There's more, and you can find the names of everyone in our program, so a big thank you to them. And I just want to say thank you as well. For yesterday's field trip, I want to thank the Bureau of Reclamation for hosting us at their Animas Plata sites, as well as Navajo Dam. So to Brett, Susan Beharry, and Kelsey, who welcomed our field trip group yesterday. It was a great opportunity to see the water management infrastructure, both on the San Juan River and the Animas, and how that works plays into the water supply for this part of the watersheds. Just a reminder, there will be a post-conference field trip as well. We'll be taking attendees to see the Bonita Peak Mining District Superfund site. We'll have a chance to see the Gladstone water treatment plant that was set up after the Gold King mine spill that's still treating the water coming out from the mine, as well as the new mine waste repository that's being built just outside of Silverton. So we still have some spaces available for those that are interested. You can either, on your own, if you want to go into your modify your registration online, or you can see one of the staff that's out front to do that. All right, so without further ado, we'll start our morning program here with Stacey Beaugh. Stacey co-owns Strategic by Nature Incorporated, a woman-owned company that provides expertise and support to those striving for impact and effective outcomes for people, land, water, and nature. In her role, Stacey supports nonprofits, government agencies, small businesses, and collaborative groups through strategic planning, facilitation, stakeholder assessment, collaborative design, conflict resolution, organizational development, executive leadership, coaching, fundraising, and training. She's been a leader in the natural resources and outdoor recreation initiatives for 18 years, serving as executive director, board member, public administrator, volunteer, a trainer, and consultant. So Stacey, thank you and welcome to the conference.
All right. Hi, everybody. Nothing like being the first one up here. Wake y'all up. Thanks so much for having me. As Mark said, I'm co-owner of Strategic by Nature, which is a company based in Durango. We mostly work in Colorado and the Four Corners region and help nonprofit groups and collaborative groups that are working on natural resource outcomes. So I do a lot of meeting facilitation and conflict resolution, but also work on special projects, and that's what I'm here presenting today. And hopefully this will be really informative, and this will just be a launch point for me to continue to connect with all of you in future conversations. So I'm going to go through the background. Sorry, I'm just getting the mic here. The background of this project and how it came about. We're really talking here about how do we seize the opportunity of lots of federal funding being infused into our systems over here in the West. And I'll walk through the program framework and then really some more of the details behind this project. So it's the Water Conservation and Infrastructure Partnership, and I'm here as a consultant on behalf of the Southwestern Water Conservation District that's spearheading this program. My partner in crime, Elle Benson from Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership based in Albuquerque, couldn't be here today, but she's kind of really working on the policy side of all this and is the person that knows all about federal funding. So if you have questions about that, I will connect you with her after my presentation. Oh, sorry, now I've got it. Okay, so we are, we're really in a situation, as you all know, of increasing drought, aridification, growing populations, development pressures on our natural resources in the West. And at the same time, we have this unprecedented amount of funding coming from the federal government, from state governments, and it's been really neat to see this influx of funding to help hopefully inch us towards solutions on some of these big environmental problems. So this program essentially was designed to put these pieces together and help advance projects that conserve water and improve infrastructure for our rivers and for watersheds, and then also help give people capacity support that they need to be successful with these projects. Taking on a large federal chunk of money is not an easy task if you've been involved in organizations that do this kind of work, and we've really learned over the years that it's a really hard lift for people, so we're trying to figure out how to help this be easier. So federal funding opportunities, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because, like I said, I'm not the expert, but essentially through the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, we've seen real amounts of money coming into conservation. $8.3 billion for Western water in the bipartisan infrastructure law, which we have named Bill, and then our $4 billion in drought mitigation in the Inflation Reduction Act, which we have named IRA. So our friends Bill and Ira are going to be with us throughout the conversation. And really there's significant money for forest management, watershed restoration, ecosystem restoration, and we have not seen the scale of money before from the federal government. Some of the federal funding opportunities, these are mostly Bureau of Reclamation. We've seen funding coming discretionarily to federal agencies, and we've also seen plus ups in existing federal programs like WaterSmart, Cooperative Watershed Management Program, and there's a whole bunch of new programs that have been established as well, and really just a lot of funding coming down to work on the things that a lot of us have been doing for a long time. The program I'm going to focus on today is really the Inflation Reduction Act reclamation funding, which was an allocation of $4 billion for drought mitigation in the Colorado River Basin and other basin states. Public entities and tribes are the only entities that are available or eligible for these funds. And they're calling, if you've heard the slang language, these programs buckets. So there's a lower basin bucket and upper Colorado River Basin bucket. And then there's also buckets that are available to other basins. This funding can be used for temporary or multi-year voluntary reductions in water use, consumptive use, and also ecosystem and habitat restoration projects, which is pretty exciting for a lot of people that aren't just necessarily working on water conservation practices. The catch with this bucket is it's not out yet, and it's this like giant mystery of what is going to be involved in how is the program going to be designed. So we know that there's going to be $450 million available for water conservation and ecosystem projects. And we know that the funds need to be obligated by 2026. And we also know that only public entities and tribes can apply for this funding. But we don't know what the structure of the funding is going to look like or the details on the criteria. So we're kind of in this anticipation mode, but also looking at all these other federal programs that I showed you earlier that are available and have money circulating through them right now. We've just passed a bunch of deadlines for WaterSmart and expect more to be coming on through the rest of the year and into next year. The cool thing about this money is that there's no match, which is a huge, exciting opportunity for a lot of us that don't have 25% match to a $200,000 project. So about 2 years ago, I worked with the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, and we created a report anticipating that this money was coming down after Bill and IRA were passed, and thinking about how are people going to get this money. There's organizations out there that are well suited to get this money, like the Nature Conservancy and Trout Unlimited, that have huge amounts of staff and infrastructure and systems that are able to manage this kind of money. But there's a lot of other organizations and entities that are not suited to get this funding because they're small and they don't have a lot of capacity. So we wanted to find out what those specific barriers were, and Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership is, or TRCP, is a policy agency, so they can help kind of work on some of these policy issues, like the match requirement that can be a really big barrier to organizations. So these are the big barriers that we found in that report. A lot of people just, aren't aware of federal funding, or the timing of it's really poor. Like, hey, let's have all the applications due right when we're in the middle of our field season. That makes it really easy. Or project fit and program focus. Like maybe the funding is available for fish, but you're working on native fish, not sport fish, or things like that don't always align. We saw that a lot of groups that have the capacity to be involved in like collaborations with federal government agencies have a lot easier time of accessing those dollars, but those collaborations take years to develop and really can be challenging. You can't just go start a collaboration in a minute. You need to have willing partners and issue that you're collaborating around. Require applicant capacity, like grant writing, is another big barrier. These federal applications are huge, like 25-page long narrative, and accessing grants.gov and hoping that it is accepted, and setting up your SAM ID. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm proving my point. And if you are nodding your head, you've been through this and know how hard it is. Equity is a big barrier. We've seen a lot over time that the organizations that have good systems in place and have strong leadership and have resources and capacity, that have the haves, are the ones that keep getting the funding, which is great, but the organizations that need help with those things aren't able to access the money that can help them establish those types of systems and organizational leadership. And so it's kind of a vicious cycle where the haves keep getting funding and the have-nots don't. Federal agency capacity, we know that this has been a constant challenge for a while, where we just don't have enough staff at the agency level to get organizations to connect with grantees and help through the application process. Scale of projects. A lot of these ecosystem restoration projects are kind of tiny, and being able to apply for a federal grant that is a minimum $500,000 to do a stream restoration project doesn't necessarily fit. And then we have other challenges in project planning, like pre-planning and engaging stakeholders and making sure you know what you need to do for permitting and all of the other pieces to getting a project off the ground. So these barriers are kind of like out there, and we surveyed 40 different organizations and found these common themes. And then said, okay, well, what are the solutions to this? And there's policy solutions like being able to reduce match requirements, or capacity solutions like let's hire some grant writers for helping organizations get money. And then this community navigator concept came up of, what if there was someone in a community that really knew what was going on with the federal funding, understood what projects were out there, and could help matchmake and help bring projects together so they could be more competitive for federal funding. So instead of one isolated stream restoration project going for funding, this navigator could help bring 3 partners together that have 10 stream restoration projects that could then go for more dollars. So, and then forming other partnerships to help develop competitive projects, like maybe you need to have academic partners in your, on your team in order to make a project successful, those types of things. So in Southwest Colorado, we have the Southwest Colorado Basin Implementation Plan. How many of you people are in Colorado familiar people? Okay, so sort of. So the state of Colorado created these 9 basin roundtables to help locally driven decisions happen around water. And our basin roundtable in Southwest Colorado updated their basin plan in 2021, and it's really a water supply and gaps and needs assessment plan. So it helps us know where our water uses, what's missing, where our challenges. And so that project produced about 148 projects that basically said we need money for these projects in order to meet our water supply and demand gaps. And then it also has spurred over time specific management, stream management or watershed planning plans in the Mancos, San Miguel, Upper San Juan, and Animas River. The Animas River is in a pre-planning phase to do this watershed plan, and they would love to reach over and include New Mexico in that. They're trying to develop the funding in that right now. So the Southwestern Water Conservation District is a special district that's designed to, or was founded to help protect, conserve, and utilize the water resources in Southwest Colorado. And they are a big partner in the Basin Implementation Plan, but they don't like run the Basin Implementation Plan, if that makes sense. So they're involved, but they're not the ones that are leading it. But then they saw an opportunity though with this impending federal money that they could take a step up because they are a public entity. They have the mission alignment to help promote water conservation projects, and they could be in the position to help leverage federal funds. So the map shows the 9 river basins that are covered in the San Juan, the Southwestern Water Conservation District, going all the way over from the Upper San Juan in the east and by Pagosa Springs, and then all the way up the Dolores River and San Miguel rivers in Southwest Colorado. So the main goal of them wanting to take on a program or create this partnership was to increase capacity for water users in Southwest Colorado to advance projects. We have 148 projects identified. How do we increase the pace and scale of those projects to actually make a difference using this money? So the first piece was they said, all right, we're going to hire a community navigator. We need somebody that's paying attention to this. The second part was let's get some funding for this person. And in Colorado, we were lucky to have the Colorado Water Conservation Board had a big influx of ARPA money that they were trying to spend, and they decided to invest it in building local capacity for groups that were trying to leverage federal funding. So we applied for that grant and received it, and our deliverable for that grant is just to apply for federal dollars. We don't even have to get it, but we have to apply for it. So we're working on that. And then we built a project pipeline. So we took the Basin Implementation Plan database of 148 projects, and we're trying to identify what the existing, what the gaps are and update that and make sure that we can get a good lay of the land of what projects are out there. So behind the scenes, we've been working really hard with partners. We've had 2 partner meetings with over 35 people attending each. We've secured these capacity funds. We've just submitted a planning and design grant to try and get some of the projects this extra design support, the pre-planning that they need to understand their project feasibility and permitting needs and position them to be able to apply for federal dollars, because that's a big hurdle for a lot of people. And then we're building relationships with people so they know that this navigator exists and that this function exists of this program, and trying to make sure that they're looped in and that if they have a project opportunity, they're contacting us or vice versa. And then we're also trying to address barriers. So working with Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership and other partners, like trying to identify what the policy solutions could be to help bring additional capacity or to make the funding more accessible, and also opportunities to address additional capacity. So can we hire a grant writer? Can we help somebody do some stakeholder outreach so that their project has community buy-in? What are the things that groups need? We're also looking at some local examples of people that have done this type of navigation program before and trying to increase capacity to bring in federal dollars. In Southwest Colorado, the Mancos Conservation District is a really great example. They hired an agricultural project coordinator with the help from River Network, and they were basically hired somebody to go out and meet with landowners and find out what their projects were and identify what they needed to move those projects to the finish line. And that project has leveraged millions of dollars for their district, and they went from a staff of half-time to up to 8 people over investing in this capacity and bringing in dollars for projects in their community. And then the Upper San Juan is over by Pagosa Springs, and they are working to implement their integrated water management plan and have tried to garner capacity dollars to hire a coordinator and bring in federal dollars to implement their projects. So our project pipeline is the last thing I'm going to talk about, and essentially it's a like I said, a big giant database. We went from 148 projects to 240. So we've been working really hard at making the rounds and talking to lots of different people about what their projects are. The interesting piece of this is that a lot of the projects are just concept. And so that right there proves the point that people need support in getting their projects into feasibility and ready to apply for funding. And so that's really what we're trying to do, is identify what those needs and gaps are. And then we're also seeing, like in the Animas River, I'm sure you're going to hear a lot about it over the next 2 days, the natural resources damages funding from the Gold King mine spill. They are asking for what are the projects that you have in the basin, and so we've been able to lean on this database to put that together as well, which has been really cool. And then we're also using those we're using integrated water management plans and trying to just get all these, there's plans all over the place that people have done. So what are the projects that have been identified? Where are they in their status? How much longer do they have before they can get implemented, and what do they need in order to get implemented? So our project pipeline essentially has project types, project life cycle phase, location, geography, land ownership, and like who's the project proponent. Is it a tribal entity? Is it a conservation district? Is it a watershed group? And then trying to organize it in all the projects into project types so that we can take a look at the database and bundle things together. So that if there is a grant opportunity, and when bucket 2 is available, we can say, let's get all the ecosystem restoration projects together, and Southwestern can apply as a public entity with all of these ecosystem projects underneath as like a programmatic application, so that we can then fund all these projects. Because each of them together, either or alone, couldn't, 1, qualify for that funding, or 2, manage that funding on their own, or it just wouldn't be as effective. So we are looking for additions to the database. If you are in the Colorado region, it would be great to get your inputs into this. This QR code goes to the website. And then we also have a partner meeting coming up on July 30th. And if you're interested in doing this kind of work in your region too, we'd definitely be excited to have you come to that meeting. There's definitely crossover, as we know, between the 2 states, and to make as many of those connections as possible would be really great. Another thing that we're doing is doing a little bit of a capacity scan. So we're trying to see like what organizations need more support to get funding, what organizations are kind of set and are planning to go for funding, so that we can understand where we can best utilize this navigator and their resources to help level the playing field in terms of who's getting money out of these federal opportunities. So in closing, I'll just say, like, I'd love to talk to you. I'll be here all day today. I'd love to know what projects you're working on here in New Mexico, what barriers you're experiencing, and if there's opportunities that we can help connect you either into this program or connect you to other resources that are available in New Mexico to help advance your projects. And our timeline is, we hired, I have a typo, but we hired the navigator in it was April 2024, and we're starting the process of bundling projects and preparing for what we hope is the bucket 2 funding opportunity coming out later this month. So just want to thank everybody that's been involved in this project so far, Southwestern Water Conservation District. TRCP, and then we have our initial seed funding's been from the Colorado Water Conservation Board. All of our emails are listed there, and I'll be here again the rest of the day, so would love to connect with you all and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Just a reminder, if anyone has a question, you can come up here to the microphone that we have set up. I'll be keeping an eye as well on our Zoom chat if anybody has any questions there. But yeah, if anyone has questions for Stacey, feel free to come on up.
It's a lot of pressure. You have to walk up to the microphone.
It is a lot of pressure. Great presentation, Stacey. My name's Jared Wood. I'm with the New Mexico Environment Department. I work on watershed planning. And my question for you is just kind of about moving stakeholders from a perception of competition to cooperation. Oftentimes what we see within watersheds or within regions is this idea of like, oh, we have this limited bucket of money. There's only a couple groups that maybe do ecological restoration work. And they're really careful to not want to step on each other's toes with good reason. And so I think it's really interesting how you're trying to bundle these groups together. And I'm wondering if you've encountered that kind of attitude and how you work with it.
Yeah, that's a great question. Without giving a whole nother presentation, I'll try and answer. So, you know, as a nonprofit development person myself, you know, funders, whether it is the federal government or a private funder, want to see collaboration. They don't want to be duplicating efforts, and not to say that these projects in different locations are duplications, but they love to see collaboration, lessons learned, sharing, whatever that is. So I think just as a principle, helping people understand that, you know, when you write grants and you're fundraising, you got to do what the funder wants, and it's, you know, it's part of the game, unfortunately, but it's also really great. And I think that we've seen through a lot of the different collaborative efforts that have been going on in Southwest Colorado that people are better together than they are on their own. The cool thing about this federal money is there's a lot of it. So it's not like it's there's $100,000 available for the whole West. It's not one of those funding opportunities. So it's been really neat to see, especially with the Water Smart grants. They've gotten a huge influx of money, and so there is a lot more to go around, which is great as well. And I think just the carrot of all this is that a lot of these groups wouldn't have the capacity or a large enough project to apply for some of this money, so that working together really makes it more accessible for everybody. Any other questions?
Hi, Stacey. Thank you. I just wanted to ask, at the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned consensus facilitation, and I was curious about what your opinion was about where in the life cycle of some of these projects you think that consensus facilitation kind of would best live, like at what point you think it would be the most beneficial?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the project, but a lot of these, like at least in Colorado, the state of Colorado won't fund your project unless it is an outcome of a watershed planning effort that's been community endorsed. So you can't just write a plan and say, I got a project. You need to show that you've got multiple people engaged, your community is behind your project. And so that's really where that comes in, is building that shared understanding of values and helping people negotiate what their priorities are for the watershed among a lot of competing priorities. So I think the pre-planning for a lot of these projects is a really important part, where you're bringing in different interest holders and stakeholders and trying to say, you know, how is this going to impact you? Do you support this project? How can you benefit from this project? And a lot of the projects that we're seeing being advanced through these programs are multi-benefit projects. So they're not just helping the agricultural producer be more efficient with their irrigation, but they're also improving fish passage or supporting recreational use in the watershed. And so being able to bring those parties together, even if it's 3 people or maybe it's 30, to have those conversations and understand how these projects are a win-win is a really integral part of helping them have a leg up when they're trying to get funded and implemented. All right, anything else? Okay, well, thank you so much. I look forward to talking to all of you today.
All right, thank you so much, Stacey. It's now my pleasure to welcome up here our next presenter, Elizabeth Stuffings from the New Mexico Environment Department. Elizabeth joined the Surface Water Quality Bureau of the New Mexico Environment Department in 2021, and she's currently manager of the TMDL and assessment team. Her work includes coordinating multi-jurisdictional sampling efforts, leading to the Bureau's probabilistic monitoring program, managing the New Mexico Fish Consumption Advisory Program, and writing TMDLs. Before joining the TMDL and assessment team, Elizabeth was a member of the Bureau's monitoring team and conducted surface water quality monitoring throughout the state. Elizabeth, welcome to the program, and I just wanted to give a shout out to Elizabeth again as one of our planning committee members. So a big thanks for her help with that as well. Okay.
All right, well, good morning, everyone. Super happy to be here with you all today. As Mark mentioned, I'm Elizabeth Stuffings with the New Mexico Environment Department Surface Water Quality Bureau. And I'm going to be providing an update on the multi-jurisdictional coordinated sampling efforts in the Animas and San Juan that have now been taking place since 2022. I think I'll also have some time just to provide some more general updates on work that the Surface Water Quality Bureau has going on in the San Juan watershed that should be relevant to people's interests here today. Okay, so first up, I'm going to start with a little bit of background information. I imagine most people here are pretty familiar with this information, so I'm going to try to keep this pretty brief. But in August of 2015, an EPA contractor triggered a 3 million gallon release from the Gold King mine into Cement Creek. That flowed into the Animas River, which is a major tributary to the San Juan River. So in response to that event, there was a widespread monitoring and watershed modeling efforts, to determine the impacts of that spill on the watershed. And certainly even in the absence of the Gold King mine spill, there are 48 historic mines that contribute metal-laden water to the Animas and San Juan, so it's certainly a study area that warrants interest. So post-Gold King mine spill, Congress appropriated $4 million per year for 5 years under the Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nation Act. And this influx of funding resulted in a collaborative effort by entities that were impacted by the Gold King spill. So that included Utah, Navajo Nation, Mountain Ute, New Mexico, Southern Ute, Colorado, and Arizona. So these entities, in collaboration with EPA, worked to determine the best way to spend these wind funds, with some of the ultimate goals of better understanding watershed impacts and with it in mind to improve water quality. So the group developed a framework for spending those WIN Act funds, and have it here up on the slide, and I'll just go over this quickly. So the framework involved monitoring, so monitoring water quality throughout the watershed, assessing the best data and literature to understand any data gaps, identify potential water quality problems and improvements. The next step of the framework was to inform the public on the condition of the watershed and as they related to designated uses throughout the watershed. And finally, the framework listed to act on identified water quality problems using the best data and science available. So it was this guiding framework that allowed the collaborative group to develop and implement long-term water quality monitoring programs in response to Gold King. So one of the components of that long-term monitoring program was an EPA-led water and sediment monitoring program. And this was developed in partnership with those states and tribes that I mentioned. And it was EPA that really guided and led this initial monitoring effort, because at the time they were the ones with the resources to do so. So the monitoring plan encompassed 39 sites along the Animas and San Juan rivers, and also some select tributaries to the San Juan. And sample locations were spread throughout the watershed from the upper Animas to just above Lake Powell. And the scope of this EPA-led monitoring effort was quite a bit broader than the initial monitoring efforts that followed immediately after Gold King. So the focus was not only on metal collection, but also other parameters throughout the watershed, so notably nutrients and minerals in water. Benthic macroinvertebrates and habitat were also sampled once per year at a subset of the 39 sampling locations. And this biological and habitat data aided in the interpretation of the chemical data that was collected. So overall, there were 10 sampling campaigns as a part of this effort. There was a noted pause during the height of COVID, and this sampling effort ceased in the fall of 2021. EPA handled all of the data analysis, all the data that was generated from this program, and all of the data are available in WQX and through the data portal, so it's readily available for folks to check out. And NMED did incorporate data from this effort into our 2020 integrated list. So the timing of sample collections was flow-based, and was to capture both peak and low flow conditions. So sampling occurred 4 times per year at base flow, winter flow, rising limb of runoff, and peak runoff. And the multi-jurisdictional sampling effort that I'll be talking about here in just a minute pretty closely mirrors this sampling schedule. And certainly there were a lot of projects going on during this time as well. So in addition to the EPA-led monitoring, a lot of those jurisdictions, the states and tribes impacted by Gold King, had various projects going on. Just a quick plug for the EPA's San Juan Watershed website. They have a lot of great information about all aspects of monitoring occurring in projects occurring in the San Juan. All right, so now on really to the meat of today's talk, the San Juan Animas Multi-Jurisdictional Monitoring Program. So this is very much a collaboration between, once again, jurisdictions that were impacted by the Gold King mine spill. And members include the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, Southern Indian Tribe, New Mexico Environment Department, Navajo Nation, and Utah Department of Environmental Quality. And sampling began shortly after the EPA-led monitoring program ceased. So sampling began in the spring of 2022, and it will continue through at least fall of 2024. But there is a lot of interest and motion behind this program. So I think we do anticipate it continuing into the future. Okay. So again, after the EPA effort ceased, the new cooperative and collaborative monitoring plan was implemented amongst the jurisdictions, once again impacted by Gold King. And the plan really worked to leverage the individual strengths of each jurisdiction to provide better geographic and temporal monitoring within the San Juan watershed. So there are a couple guiding objectives to this group. The first being to provide monitoring data at a frequency greater than respective jurisdiction monitoring programs to allow for current condition estimates of water quality in the Animas and San Juan rivers. And so, I can certainly speak for NMED. Our water quality monitoring program occurs on a rotational basis. So it can take us up to 10 years to return to any given watershed to collect new data. So this program really cuts down on that return interval, and we have more recent, more relevant data to assess. The other objective is to establish a consistent collection schedule, parameter methodology, and analytical regime across jurisdictions. And this is really to allow us to better compare data that's being collected by jurisdictions throughout the watershed. So the group, we've completed 3 sampling events in both 2022 and 2023. And just last week, we wrapped up our second spring sampling event of 2024. And the group will be getting back out this fall to complete a base flow collection. So you can pretty much think of our monitoring area as a shrunk down version of the EPA-led monitoring effort. So the project area includes the Animas River in the San Juan, downstream of Navajo Lake, upstream of Lake Powell, and encompasses sites throughout the Four Corners region. So currently, we have 13 monitoring locations. And as I mentioned before, we pretty closely mirror EPA's timing, but we are only sampling 3 times per year rather than 4. And our aim is to capture winter low flow, runoff, and base flow. So this is very much a coordinated effort between all the groups involved. Sampling is conducted in each jurisdiction during the same week, during each of those 3 sampling events. So for the past couple of years, that has typically occurred in the first week of April, June, and October. So for the upper and mid Animas, the CDPHE, they do all of the sample collection as well as the data analysis. For the lower Animas, Southern Ute performs all of the sample collection, and NMED provides analytical services. And for the San Juan, Navajo Nation collects all of the samples, and both NMED and Utah DEQ provide the analytical services. And data that's collected by Navajo Nation in Southern Ute within New Mexico is verified and validated by NMED and uploaded to first our internal database before being pushed to WQX. Okay, so for the first now 2.5 years of this program, monitoring has really concentrated on chemical and physical chemical parameters in surface waters of the San Juan and Animas rivers. So the groups are currently collecting total metals, dissolved metals, nutrients, and minerals. We also collect E. coli. There have been some hurdles for some of our jurisdictions for consistently collecting E. coli, but we are trending in a more consistent way. And at each of the collections, we are gathering SON measurements, so temperature, pH, dissolved oxygen, specific conductivity, and turbidity. Currently, the CDPHE is the only jurisdiction that is also collecting sediment. And this is certainly a parameter that I could see being more broadly applied in the future. Our very first report using the data generated by the jurisdictions is forthcoming. And we really anticipate after the groups have a chance to take a look at that report, dive into the data, that new parameters might be applied to sampling efforts. And currently, we really just are focusing on grab samples and not veering into any samples that require, extra collection efforts or materials. So, for example, we aren't filtering for aluminum when we collect total metals. Okay, and so now, what are we doing? We've started to generate quite a bit of data. So what are we doing with that data? So data from 2022 and 2023 is in WQX. Data from this year and any future years will also be pushed into WQX. And when it comes to the assessment of the data, at the very minimum, tribes will produce assessment reports, and states will produce integrated reports and lists of assessed water. And as I mentioned just before, we are in the process of producing our first report for this effort. And a primary goal of this report is to improve analysis of waters across the different jurisdictions. So diving into that in just a little bit more detail, Alan Ochoa Rodriguez from Utah DEQ is really doing the heavy lifting on this. So he is building out the report. And we are specifically looking to produce a data dashboard rather than a static PDF. So Alan has been busy working on this dashboard throughout the spring, and the multi-jurisdictional group is going to get together this July and take a first look at the draft, provide input on where we want to go. And so far, the big point of discussion amongst the group has been how best to compare data across the jurisdictions, because we have so many different criteria that apply to each jurisdiction. So one option that we are currently considering is a percentile approach used by USGS and NERSA. And so these percentile results would be expressed as good, fair, poor, and could be dynamic based on how the user filters within the database. One thing Alan's working through is that we have a lot of non-detect values, and those would skew those percentiles. So once again, working through those scenarios, and that doesn't, even though we have that hurdle, it doesn't necessarily mean that we can't use a specific numeric benchmark for each parameter. All right, and then here's a look at how the data could potentially be displayed within the dashboard. The user could filter by parameter, jurisdiction, sample fraction. We do have a lot of parameters, so we realize it could get overwhelming pretty quickly. So Alan is working on a bird's eye view summary of the various parameters so that a user could quickly identify the parameter of interest. And then finally, we've had talks about how data will be displayed and queried within this dashboard. So using the main data filters, any user could filter data and then select a specific site of interest. And if we do want to include specific criteria to the jurisdictions, this might be the place that we do that. So really the main takeaway here is that we have a big amount of data, we're working through it, and we're getting pretty close to having our first report out. And we really imagine that this report is going to guide future sampling efforts with the group. Okay, we've definitely run into a few roadblocks throughout the last couple of years. One has been with E. coli sampling, and just it's been variable, and not every jurisdiction has been able to consistently sample for E. coli. One potential solution that NMED is considering is purchasing a mobile incubator and sealer that could be housed in Farmington and made available to NGOs, other agencies, tribes, so that might help with short hold times, et cetera. We did collect dissolved organic carbon in 2022, but quickly ran into massive blank hit issues. So we've paused DOC collection for now. We do have some good information from other states on how to address those blank hit issues, so that they might come back online in the future. I'm sure this is an issue everyone here faces, but staff capacity and turnover can really deter some of the progress that the group has been making, but things have been consistent. And no matter the challenges, the group has successfully completed 3 sampling efforts every year. And then finally, timing. The groups get together and we try to work through everyone's schedules and figure out when 3 times per year can everyone be out sampling during the same days, and also trying to match that to our desired flow conditions. And really, I think it's safe to say the big success of this is simply the collaboration between the agencies. At this point, our sampling efforts are very much a well-oiled machine. So as we move into the future, it might want to take on new parameters, add additional sites. I think we're well poised to do that. So one last bit about the multi-jurisdictional sampling effort is this past winter, we did take our first stab at PFAS monitoring. So we created an addendum to our sampling and analysis plan, and sampling occurred in December of last year. So the goals of this limited PFAS sampling were to follow up at sites that were identified in the EPA's PFAS sampling efforts within the San Juan watershed. And then NMED was also interested in doing a split sample, sending it to multiple labs to compare methods and results amongst labs. So this work was completed by Navajo Nation and NMED. We sampled 7 sites in total, and our results are still pending, but we do anticipate a follow-up sampling effort in late summer, early fall of this year. And there's certainly the possibility that PFAS monitoring could be extended to other locations within our sampling area. All right, so I'm going to veer off here and briefly touch on some projects that NMED has going on or is considering within the San Juan watershed that I think would be of interest to the folks here. And I should note that these projects are not necessarily funded either in entirety or in part with WIN Act appropriations. So first up, we have the New Mexico Fish Consumption Advisories. So consumption advisories are designed to reduce the risk of adverse health conditions or health problems from eating fish that are caught within New Mexico. So NMED, in collaboration with New Mexico Department of Game and Fish, conducts periodic sampling of fish tissue throughout the state, and our focus is very much on lakes throughout the state. So once again, this is very much a collaborative effort. In recent years, Game and Fish has done the bulk of the actual collection, and they've been collecting fish from about 1 to 3 lakes per year for us. NMED provides the analytical services as well as assistance with fish collection. And the New Mexico Department of Health assists us with public messaging. So within New Mexico fish, there are really 3 primary contaminants of concern. We have mercury, PCBs, and DDT. And so when we collect fish, those are what we're analyzing for. And after we receive data back from a laboratory, NMED then makes recommendations on fish consumption, and those are expressed in meals per month. And that's all based on EPA guidance. So this is applicable to the San Juan, because actually just today, Game and Fish is wrapping up a 3-day fish survey at Navajo Lake. And we expect that they're going to be collecting kokanee, white suckers, and rainbow trout. NMED might be doing some follow-up sampling at Navajo Lake just to collect additional species of interest. So data from Navajo Lake will be included in our December 2022 update to the Fish Consumption Advisory. It'll also be in Game and Fish's Fishing Rules and Information booklet. So here on the slide, I've included a snapshot of what our Fish Consumption Advisory chart looks like. So you can see we have fish species, and the advisories are applied to different size classes of fish. And as of now, the only contaminant of concern from either Lake Farmington or Navajo Lake is mercury. And as I've mentioned, NMED, or the Surface Water Quality Bureau, has a rotational water quality monitoring framework, and our fish consumption advisories used to be directly tied to those field sampling plans. So this winter, we actually created a sampling analysis plan just for fish consumption advisories. So we're no longer tied to those really long return intervals to lakes throughout the state. So we do have some catch-up work to do. As you can see on the chart here, Navajo Lake, the last time we sampled it was 2012. So our goal, now that we're no longer tied to that rotational survey, is to get caught up on the more popular lakes. So Lake Farmington is definitely on our radar to sample within the near future. And one last thing on fish consumption advisories is we did take our first crack at monitoring for PFAS in fish tissue just last month. We collected fish from Heron Lake, and yeah, we'll see what our results are. And I think given the interest in emerging contaminants, that will be more broadly applied throughout the state in the future. All right, next up, we are in the process of our San Juan Watershed TMDL revisions. So under the Section 303D1 of the Federal Clean Water Act, each state is required to develop a list of waters within the state which are not supporting their designated uses and establish a total maximum daily load for those waters. So all of the TMDLs in the San Juan Watershed are old. We're approaching 20 years on some of them. So we have them on our queue to revise them and update them. And there are three TMDLs in the San Juan Watershed, one for the Animas River, and then we have a two-parter for the San Juan. So this is scheduled to be completed in 2025, and there will be opportunities for public input on these TMDLs. The best way to stay informed on this process, if you aren't on SWQB's email list, you can easily access that from our website. In order to get ready for this TMDL revision process, we are doing some data gap sampling in the watershed this summer. We're going to be doing habitat surveys, collecting some chemical data, and deploying DO loggers and sondes to update the data that we have to pull from. Okay, next up, we have our 3D HP, our 3D hydrography program. And this is something that NMED is very interested in pursuing, specifically, I should say potentially specifically, here in the San Juan watershed. So hydrography data is mapped locations of streams and other water bodies, and it's really a fundamental data set for understanding the nature of a watershed and for planning and restoration activities. So the USGS National Hydrography Data Set is a federal program that maps surface water and drainage networks. And with the advent of new technology, that NHD no longer matches actual elevations, so is in need of updating. The USGS is replacing the National Hydrography Dataset, the Watershed Boundary Dataset, and NHD Plus with this 3D HP. And the 3D HP is a single product that will include lakes, streams, catchments, drainage areas, and other hydraulic features. So once again, the ultimate reason for why NMED is interested in pursuing these updates is to have better data, which can guide better understanding of watersheds, flow regimes, and restoration projects. So with all that said, NMED did form an interagency working group in March 2024 to discuss this effort. So we're in the process of developing case studies and determining potential funding sources. And so where the San Juan comes into play is that the Surface Water Quality Bureau has identified both the San Juan, the Middle San Juan, and the Animas as potential priority watersheds to update. It's a quite expensive endeavor to the tune of about $40 million for the whole state. So just focusing on a particular watershed is much more realistic for us. And given tribal ownership within those watersheds, perhaps even focusing on 10-digit HUCs within those, the Animas and the San Juan might even be more realistic for us. So there's the potential for NMED to put in an application for this program as early as this fall. It's very much a collaborative endeavor, so we are actively working into rope other interested parties. And then finally, I'll just touch on this quite briefly, but I wanted to touch on the Surface Water Quality Bureau's probabilistic monitoring program. And while this effort doesn't currently directly impact the San Juan watershed, there are potential future implications for it. So the Surface Water Quality Bureau began its probabilistic monitoring program in 2019. Those monitoring efforts have occurred in the Upper Pecos, Gila, and Jemez watersheds. And those probabilistic monitoring surveys, once again, were tied to our rotational water quality surveys. We are now shifting to a statewide design, and our focus for 2025 and 2026 is going to be the entirety of the Rio Grande. We'll be sampling 50 sites over 2 years. And really the goal of this project is to characterize large river nutrients. So we'll be collecting nutrient stressor and response variables. The overarching goal of this program is to develop a large river nutrient assessment protocol. Currently, NMED only has a nutrient assessment protocol for perennial wadable rivers or river segments and streams. So if this effort is successful, it could be eventually applied to other non-wadable rivers throughout the state, including San Juan. All right, so with all that said, I'd be happy to take any questions that anyone has, either on the multi-jurisdictional sampling effort or the work that NMED is doing in the San Juan or has in the hopper. And I have included all of the points of contact for the multi-jurisdictional group. Feel free to reach out to anyone if you have a specific question for those folks. If nothing immediately pops to mind for questions, I'll be here all day today, tomorrow, on the field trip Friday, so feel free to find me at any time. I'd be happy to talk.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. Now to switch gears a little bit to the recreation side of water use in the San Juan River, I'd like to welcome Ryan Dudgeon of Desert River Guides as our next presenter. Ryan grew up in Farmington, New Mexico. After receiving his bachelor's degree from Fort Lewis College, he and his husband Cody moved to Missoula, Montana, where they became river guides for Lewis and Clark Trail Adventures. In 2012, he attended the University of Montana and received his master's degree in archaeology and cultural heritage. Him and his husband moved to the Four Corners area in 2015. Let's see. After moving back to Farmington, he and Cody both got involved in the River Reach Foundation, and this is when they saw the need for rafting in Farmington. They never planned on opening an outfitting company, but with encouragement from the River Reach Foundation and the city of Farmington, they took the leap in 2019 to start developing their own company. They opened this company, Desert River Guides, in May of 2021, and he now teaches 4th grade at McKinley Elementary, as well as run and guide for Desert River Guides. Thank you, Ryan.
Hey, surprise! Good morning. Okay. Yes, I'm Ryan, so fake out with the name, but I own Desert River Guides. Wonderful. So yes, I own Desert River Guides. We're the local rafting company here in Farmington. Like Mark said, we started in November 2019. We kind of decided to go for it, took the leap. We worked with Warren Unsicker and the Outdoor Recreation Industries Initiative to kind of get started. He put us in our building, which is down by the hospital here in town. We worked with the San Juan College Small Business Department to get started. We worked with Wes. So we worked with a lot of local entities to get this business off the ground. Jack's Plastic Welding is located in Aztec, New Mexico. If you guys are not aware, they build rafts, and Paco Pads is a big thing that they do, if you guys have ever done any river camping. So they've built a couple of our rafts. We're really good friends with them. The city of Farmington really helped us a lot. The River Reach Foundation, of course. We do their raft trips for Riverfest. And then we opened up in May of 21. So we started small with 4 rafts and 6 employees, and we've built this business. We do rafting on the Animas and the San Juan. Right now, primarily we're on the Animas because there is water there. But the lucky thing about Farmington in a unique situation is that we do get runoff from the dam. So when the Animas runs out of water, essentially, we can float down the San Juan. Our typical floats float from Westland Park, which is just west of town, to Kirtland. So it's about 7 miles. And so that's our San Juan float that we primarily do. So you can see here just some pictures of rafting, I guess. So we grew the company. Season 2, we got 2 more rafts to meet the demand. People started coming in from other places. Originally, it started kind of just local. And now, as we're even into season 4, we're seeing a lot more people coming in. So we did have to expand the company. We did a lot of training. 2023 was high water, super fun. So we have just been kind of growing with that. We've also been doing a lot of collaborations with local companies, Three Rivers Brewing and Wines of the San Juan, which is also increasing visitors from out of the area. So now in 2024, we have been doing a lot more to try to grow this company. We did do a scouting mission from Shiprock to the Four Corners National Monument in February with the permission of the Navajo Nation Parks and Rec. Kind of made a map because nobody really has ever done this section. So we didn't really know where to go. We didn't know what to expect. We're trying to eventually, potentially make a multi-day situation happen out of the Farmington area. We held a rafting clinic at the Aquatic Center. My main goal is to get people water aware and safety, right? Because it's not really a big thing. Durango is right next door, but people here in Farmington don't really know water safety, and so we're trying to get that into the community. For Riverfest this year, we had about 480 people we took downstream in 2 days, so that was a great turnout. We put on a paddle film fest at the Tota Theater. That was a lot of fun. So again, collaborating with local groups. Now we have 16 employees, keeping them busy. We've been in the Adventure Guide, collaborations with the Three Rivers Brewery and the Wines of the San Juan. This weekend we're doing a brewery float if you guys are around. And we've also done several river cleanups, and I guess this is going to touch to you guys. We have noticed a lot of trash in the rivers here. But we've gained some national recognition with American Whitewater and Protect Our Rivers. So they are going to kind of help with our cleanup efforts. And again, we've noticed an increase in out-of-state visitors. So getting to the cleanups. We talk about E. coli, but I don't know about tires. So we've cleaned up about 85 tires out of the San Juan and the Animas this year, which is a crazy amount. I would say that we never noticed this issue during our season last year, but at the end of the season in the fall of last year, I was on a trip with some of my guides, and there was an extreme amount of tires in the river. So we don't know if they were dumped or if they were eroded out of the banks because they've been used for bank stabilization. But we put in a cleanup effort and got 27 out in October last year. And then these pictures are from April, Earth Day. And this section that we floated where we pulled 51 tires out was between McGee Park and Westland Park. So not a very long stretch, but there were 51 tires. So we cleaned those up. The county took care of them for us. That was amazing. And so our efforts, we try to promote that stewardship. Again, that expedition from the Shiprock to the Four Corners National Monument happened in February. We worked with Sarah Burke, the Animas Riverkeeper, and we GPS mapped the river looking for potential camping spots, like I said, to do a multi-day trip out of Farmington. So other things that we've done, we've provided raft support, and I didn't get all the letters into this, but for the San Juan Water and Soil Conservation District with Alyssa, we helped her with her E. coli study, I think 2022. Yep, okay. So we helped with that. We did the sampling. We helped with sampling efforts for that. I've been presenting at local schools, again, trying to get kids water aware and safety. And now I'm currently working with Diversify Whitewater and NRS to bring water safety and training to the local fourth graders. So I'm going to create a program within our school district to get kids on the water safely. Stewardship, with our guides in our community. You know, our efforts have been noticed and people are, you know, joining us in our cleanup efforts. We do provide our own guide training, which I think is a unique thing for rafting companies. And we are going to offer a safety whitewater clinic to private boaters in July, so that we can get more people to enjoy our beautiful watershed. We've collaborated with the city for river maps and signage and local businesses. And really, it's just our point is to bring family-friendly rafting to our scene here in Farmington. That's it. So quick and short, but we do, yeah, we like to recreate on this watershed and we like to keep it safe. So there we go.
Okay. For our next three presentations, before our lunch at 12:30, we're going to be taking a deep look into water quality. And so to start out this last morning portion of our program, I'd like to welcome Nate Kamm. Nate's originally from Albuquerque and went to Bosque School, where he was introduced to watershed science through the Bosque Ecosystem Monitoring Program. He attended Loyola University, New Orleans, and graduated with a BS in chemistry. Nate started his career in ecology interning at the Valles Caldera National Preserve and then working for the Carson National Forest Watershed Program. Nate is thrilled to be returning to New Mexico after a 1.5-year stint in California, where he worked with the Sequoia National Forest and the Resource Conservation District of the Santa Monica Mountains. With the NMED Surface Water Quality Bureau, Nate serves as a water quality standards scientist and is coordinating efforts on harmful algal blooms, HABs. Nate's favorite thing is exploring the outdoors, whether it's skiing, fly fishing, or backpacking. He's always excited to share photos of his adventures. Welcome to the conference, Nate.
Hi, everybody. Like Mark said, my name's Nate Kamm. I am a water quality standards scientist at the New Mexico Environment Department. So today I'm here to talk to you all about our harmful algal blooms program. I started at NMED in December, and I did not know much about harmful algal blooms before that. So if you're like me, we're going to start from the ground up. So this will be a lot of introductory education. It's a lot of dense info, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me afterwards to follow up, and I can hook you up with lots of good resources. Harmful algal blooms are overgrowths of algae in water that pose a health risk to people and animals. In New Mexico, some cyanobacteria blooms can produce cyanotoxins with the potential to severely affect human and animal health. Cyanobacteria generally grow in lakes, ponds, and slow-moving streams when water is warm and stagnant. Cyanobacteria are commonly referred to as blue-green algae because they look very similar to algae. In other states, harmful algal blooms can be more than just cyanobacteria, but in New Mexico, that's our primary HAB of concern. And then, yeah, cyanobacteria and blue-green algae are the same thing, and they're not necessarily dangerous. They exist in a lot of our water systems at low levels, and when they have the right environmental factors, they can get out of control, and certain types of cyanobacteria can produce those dangerous cyanotoxins. So some fun facts: cyanobacteria are around 3.5 million years old. They're actually responsible for producing a lot of the oxygen in our atmosphere. They're not technically algae, but they do produce chlorophyll A and are photosynthetic. Being photosynthetic, that's why they can look so many different colors. It's an adaptation to capture that light. Many types of cyanobacteria can actually control their buoyancy in the water, another adaptation to be able to capture light. That can also result in some patterns where they will rise to the surface during the morning, and then as they collect their sugars throughout the day, they start to sink back down where they can capture phosphorus from the sediment. Another cool adaptation cyanobacteria have is a lot can capture atmospheric nitrogen, so just capture nitrogen out of the air. And they can grow really fast. They reproduce by cell division, and they can do up to 3 doublings per day, which would mean going from 1 cell to 8 cells. Of course, to do that, they need the right conditions. HABs can look like grass clippings, blue-green scum, or spilled paint on the water surface. Blooms can be blue, bright green, brown, or red. Cyanobacteria may also be suspended in the water column or attached to rocks, sediment, or aquatic plants. Some blooms may not affect the appearance of the water, but the algae in the bloom's dye can make the water smell bad. So there's a huge variety of cyanobacteria. They can look a lot of different ways. So I'm going to go through some specific kinds that we've seen here in New Mexico. They all are known to be toxin producers, so we can all be on the lookout. So the most common type of freshwater HAB in North America is Microcystis. Microcystis is unicellular, so they can't control their buoyancy. They also can't capture that atmospheric nitrogen. One idea emerging in the science is that because they can't capture the atmospheric nitrogen, they're popping up a lot more because there's more nitrogen available to them in water. Specific kind of Microcystis that is most commonly found is Microcystis aeruginosa. This was found to be the dominant strain in a couple of blooms we had in 2019 at Abbacue Lake and Cochiti. Another cyanobacteria we've seen in New Mexico is Dolichospermum. You see here on some of these microscopic images, they're a little bit bigger than Microcystis. So one of their adaptations is they have this shape, and that helps them catch water currents and helps keep them afloat. And also their large shape helps to keep the insides of them safe when they're being grazed. Athanazomenon, this is the one that can really look like grass clippings on the water. They also have those adaptations to help them stay afloat and protect from grazers. Rhonicinia, this one I like to point out because we really don't know a ton about cyanobacteria. The state of science is very young and we're learning more every day. So it was thought for a long time that these were toxin producers, but some recent research out of the Pacific Northwest is showing that they may not. Gloeotrichia, this one also has a little bit different shape from Dolichospermum, but they have the same adaptations to be able to catch those microcurrents in the water to be able to float, and that big structure so that their outsides can get grazed, but their insides remain safe. Lingbia, and yeah, just, you don't need to remember all the big names, but getting a good idea of how different all these can look and what to look out for. And then this one is really cool, Planktothrix. It can appear red, so you definitely don't want to be jumping in the water if it's looking like that. So those are some specific types of cyanobacteria we've observed in New Mexico that are known to produce toxins. Again, not all cyanobacteria produce cyanotoxins. But here's a little bit about cyanotoxins. On the left here, we have a number of the cyanotoxins: saxitoxin, guanotoxin. There's that third one down is the microcystin, which is the most commonly found, compared to some more common toxins that you might be aware of, like ricin, cobra toxin. So this is comparing the lethal dose. So saxitoxin is more potent than cobra toxin. An important thing to think about when talking about toxins, of course, is the exposure route. If you're ingesting it, that's obviously going to cause a lot more problems than if you're just exposed to it on your skin. Here is a large chart mapping out on the left a bunch of different types of cyanobacteria and then what kinds of toxins they produce. Dermatotoxins affect the skin, and their effects can show up in hours. Hepatotoxins affect the liver, and that can take days to weeks to show up. And neurotoxins affect the nervous system, which takes minutes. Here I'll point out Dolichospermum, which is about in the middle. Sorry, I don't have a point or anything. So one thing that makes this really hard is that just because you have a toxin-producing cyanobacteria doesn't mean that it is producing toxins. And some of them can produce a lot of toxins. So if we look at the Dolichospermum here, it's been known to produce cylindrospermopsin, microcystin, anatoxin, BMAA, guanotoxin, neosaxitoxin, and saxitoxin. So to analyze for these toxins, they all take a different lab analysis. So it can get quite tough to narrow down exactly what you're looking for. Because cyanotoxins are so well adapted and so variable, it makes monitoring them quite a challenge. So here in this picture is a picture from a lake in Iowa, where on the left side here on July 31st, 2006, they had a huge dense bloom. You can see that collected in the beaker there. By the time the news heard about it, on August 3rd, they went out and the beach looked like the picture on the top right. So the bloom wasn't in that location anymore. And then on August 11th, they found it in another area of the lake. So a big part of that variability is variability in space and time. So because the cyanobacteria can control their depth in the water column, they'll float up and be on the surface at certain times, and then sometimes be deeper down. So you're not always sure where it's going to be, and it can vary by time. On the bottom here, there's an example of sampling. Just look at the surface amounts on the left and the time. So at 9:30 in the morning, it was almost 2 times as more concentrated as at 5 p.m. And then in the top picture, these are 2 samples that were collected 50 meters apart. In New Mexico, we have a microcystin criteria of 8 micrograms per liter. So this sample on the left would have exceeded that criteria, while the sample on the right would not. And again, the trend we oftentimes see is that because the cyanobacteria need light, they come up to the surface during the morning, and then they start to fall back down deeper in the water column in the afternoon. And they're also seasonal. So we tend to see these blooms in the summer season and into fall. And then once it gets colder, they disappear. Another challenge to monitoring is that toxicity can be quite variable. So just because a known toxin producer exists doesn't mean it has the toxin producing gene. And then just because the gene exists doesn't mean it's being expressed. So here's a bit of a flow chart put out by the EPA for how to monitor for toxins. It's best to screen for the cyanobacteria. Once you know if there is a potential toxin-producing cyanobacteria, you can go back to something like that chart I showed you earlier to figure out which toxins to screen for. Like I said, the science is really getting better every day. There's lots of promising research in analyzing the genetic characteristics of the cyanobacteria, and we're hoping that that'll help streamline a lot of our monitoring capabilities. Perhaps you've heard of some of these HABs in the news. In the Gulf Coast, perhaps you've heard of the crimson tide or the red tide. That is a marine harmful algal bloom that we wouldn't have in New Mexico. It's called Karenia brevis and is a dinoflagellate. It produces a different toxin called brevetoxin. And of course, if you're a college football fan, you probably know of the Alabama Crimson Tide, who is named after this event. In 2014, there was the Toledo water crisis, where microcystis established in a Great Lake, Lake Erie, and shut down the city's water supply for 3 days for over 400,000 people. About a year ago, I was working in the Los Angeles area when this was all happening. A bunch of marine mammals started to wash up on the shore and dying. Originally, scientists weren't sure why, but they believed that freshwater cyanobacteria was producing toxins which were flowing out into the ocean, and then filter feeders like mussels started to pick that up, and then it bioaccumulated through the food chain until it affected these larger mammals. And then to bring it home, here's some examples of HABs in the news in New Mexico from Abiquiu and Elephant Butte. Notice on the left, the headline, "Toxic Algae Killing Dogs Found in 2 New Mexico Lakes." We want, a big part of the reason we're establishing this HAB program is to be able to help communication with the public to avoid sort of really scary headlines like this that could be detrimental to a community that relies on lake tourism. And then here, this top photo in the middle, you can see some of the blue-green scum drying up on the side of the lake. So a lot of times, the cyanotoxins are contained within the cell of the cyanobacteria, but once they start to die off, those cyanotoxins leach into the water. So sometimes when you see it drying up on the side like this, that's when those cyanotoxins are leaching into the water and then may be located where you can't actually see a cyanobacteria bloom. Also, because, as I said earlier, how you are exposed to these makes a big difference. A lot of times we see animals affected, like dogs, because they're actually ingesting the water. So what have we done in New Mexico so far? During the 2020 Triennial Review, New Mexico adopted criteria for 2 cyanotoxins, microcystin and cylindrospermopsin. We've done sampling for those, but it's been along with our normal lake sampling. As Elizabeth said earlier, we have a rotational watershed sampling program. So it could be as much as 10 years before we return to a certain lake. And we aren't necessarily targeting the time periods in which you would expect cyanobacteria and cyanotoxins to be present. Also, as a part of our narrative nutrient criteria, we look at the levels of cyanobacteria in a lake as an indicator for nitrogen and phosphorus. Just recently, we've published a HABs webpage to help increase quality communication and education with the public. We're hoping to keep building this out and hoping to include a larger photo gallery, a link to a form where you can report a bloom, hopefully have a map featuring lakes with HAB events, and then links to the Cyan app, which I'll talk about in just a minute. We've also started the New Mexico HABs Collaborative Working Group. So this is a platform for lake managers, researchers, state and tribal partners to come together to address HABs in New Mexico. It's been great to see how much people have been out there working on this problem and bringing them all together. Collaboration is an important part of the mission for the New Mexico Environment Department, and we really can tackle a lot more when we work together. So if any of you work with HABs, I'd love to talk to you about what you've been doing. And yeah, if you have any concerns, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. So we don't have this quite yet, but we're working towards an advisory system. So every state, or lots of states, have advisory systems, and they all have their own detailed way of going after it. This is an example from Wyoming, and it sort of follows that idea from the flow chart I showed you earlier on how to monitor for cyanotoxins. So you can have a bloom advisory or a toxin advisory, all based on certain levels published. And this is a really good way to communicate danger to the public. You know, a lot of times you're asked, is it safe or is it not? With these super variable cyanobacteria, it's hard to just say yes or no. So it's really taking a lot of pieces to the puzzle and fitting it together, and this is a good way to communicate that complex system. And then the Cyan app, Cyan stands for the Cyanobacteria Assessment Network. It's a collaborative effort between the EPA and NASA using satellite data to scan for cyanobacteria in lakes. Again, it's just scanning for the cyanobacteria and not for cyanotoxins, so it's just one piece of that puzzle. It can give you real-time data, so a satellite flies over daily and you can get yesterday's data today. They're using Sentinel-3 satellites now, which affects the resolution that they have. So in New Mexico, we don't have a lot of really big lakes. For the quality control that they recommend is to have your lake be at least 900 meters by 900 meters for it to be resolvable. Navajo Lake does fit into that. On here, I have an example from last year from Elephant Butte showing cyan data. So the more colors that pop up in the lake shows denser algal bloom. So you can see on July 9th, there was almost nothing in the lake, and then on July 16th, you start to see it establish. By July 30th, the harmful algal bloom is almost in the entire lake, and then by August 6th, you can see it starting to move out. One more thing the Cyan app is working on is that they're going to come out with a forecast, so you can get forecasted bloom events up to 5 days before they happen. So we're really looking forward to that, and that data, when it rolls out, will be available through the EPA How's My Waterway app. And then this one we're really excited about is Bloom Watch. So Bloom Watch is another EPA project where we can have the public be able to report blooms. We'd really love anyone who wants to get involved. All you got to do is go on to your smartphone or just the website and download the app. There's a few instructional videos that teach you how to use the app and what to look out for. And then you can go out and take pictures, report it to the EPA, and then we at NMED will get notified. So I included down at the bottom here the URL for that if you're interested. And thank you. So from here, we're going to keep building on all that synergy. We're going to build out the web page, look at standards for more toxins using EPA guidance. We're hoping to build in that advisory plan I was telling you about, review our listing methodology for lakes, and then keep engaging with the public and partners to build out our network, help bolster our monitoring. And thank you so much. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask now or approach me or email me at any time. Thank you.